All right, for more on this, we now speak to SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena. Good afternoon to you, Sophie. Help us, of course, place this renewed violence that we are seeing in Mozambique. We know, of course, that this does follows that ruling by the highest court in terms of the disputed elections of October 9th.
Yes, as you know that the leader of the now official opposition called on his supporters and Mozambicans to continue to protest, and these protests have turned violent. And we know that yesterday you heard that there were prison escapes from in Maputo, but we now understand that that was not the only area. Other prisoners escaped from other smaller prisons, and therefore when they continued with the hunting down those who escaped from prison, again that whole process turned violent, and we are told that during those escapes the other people were killed, 33 people died. And now violence has escalated. But as you know that there was a decision taken that during the day they wouldn't protest, but they would start protests in the afternoon. And therefore you see visuals and information coming later in the day when the protesters are protesting late in the afternoon. The intention was to find a way to manage a situation where you don't really harm the economy. But I think in the coming days that is going to be difficult. That has even prompted the leader of the now official opposition, Venancio Mondlane, to call on his supporters and the Mozambicans to be calm, but also to ensure that they don't destroy property. Let's take a listen at what he had to say yesterday in relation to the destruction that we see now in Mozambique. Let's take a listen.
Meus irmãos,
don't allow them to manipulate your mind. They want to manipulate your mind so that you believe that our fight is against private property. The private sector is our friend. We are not against the private sector.
São de vandalismo.
Some very strong words there, Sophie. Many calls, of course, have been made for SADC to intervene, Sophie, and do so, urgently. Talk to us about South Africa's role here, because a lot of those calls made to SADC are actually also directed mainly to South Africa. And of course, we know that the two countries between South Africa and Mozambique have strong economic ties. When you look at, for instance, the Maputo corridor for one, but we've seen how these protests have really impacted on many businesses, both here in South Africa as well as in Mozambique.
Well, South Africa finds itself in a very difficult situation. You know that the ANC is a friend to Frelimo, and for many years, these are the people who assisted the Liberation Organization to continue to fight side by side with other organizations so that South Africa can be free. When the then apartheid government was supporting Renamo in Mozambique, that led even to the civil war. So now you have the ANC in government, and therefore government is taking a more diplomatic position in terms of calling for calm, even encouraging stakeholders to engage in the negotiations. And therefore, South Africa is in that difficult situation. But the issue, or one thing that I observed, because I'm speaking also to the opposition, particularly those who are in support of Venancio Mondlane, who is currently in Europe, is that they still prefer South Africa to facilitate or to mediate or to help the country to reach a conclusion in terms of finding a solution to this standoff now. And therefore, for me, I think there's still trust that South Africa can play a role in terms of assisting the country to find a solution. but also the country will then, at government level, be able to do that. At the ANC, the party level, President Ramaphosa's comrades or colleagues within the leadership of the ANC would continue to support Frelimo because these are sister parties. So I think it is a very, very difficult position. And that is why you see people saying South Africa must do something, South Africa must do something. South Africa can only use diplomatic means to try and persuade the stakeholders in Mozambique to find a solution to this situation. Secondly, South Africa is neither the chair of the SADC, the regional organization, or the organ on politics, defense, and security. And therefore, it has to also take into consideration that there's regional leadership that is supposed to lead in terms of finding a solution. But unfortunately, with Zimbabwe, we know there are issues with some of the political parties. That is why they prefer South Africa. With Tanzania, I don't think the leader of Tanzania has a problem. She can play a role as the chair of the organ on politics, defense, and security, but we haven't had much from her. But this problem is on her doorstep because when you look at that region, Cabo Delgado, it's a border between Tanzania and Mozambique. And some people, some of them live in Tanzania, others live in Mozambique. You know, it's like your border with Basotho, Botswana, Swaziland, where you are, yes, South Africa, an independent state, but you are linked to these neighboring countries as families, as friends.
Yeah.
And therefore, she can intervene, but she has to be careful because of that situation in Cabo Delgado.
Yeah.
And therefore, it is a tricky one. Just a few minutes ago, I received an email from the AU, the continental body, the AU Commission Chair, the outgoing Chair, Musafaki, issuing a statement calling for restraint, particularly in relation to the security forces, how they are trying to bring law and order. And we saw those disturbing visuals that we also have where people were brutalized. And therefore, I think the AU is responding to those videos and following the reports from international media, including ourselves.
Yeah.
And therefore, you also have countries such as the United States of America doing the same. We had even yesterday the Pope calling for peace in those areas, such as Ukraine, Middle East, including Mozambique. And therefore, everybody is trying to call for peace and a lasting solution, but it is very difficult for now to really make sense of when will this happen, when are we likely going to see those who are fighting agreeing to sit on the table and talk about these issues, because Frelimo will also not want to be seen as weak because they've been pronounced as the party that has won elections. So it is a very, very sensitive matter. People are even proposing that the seniors in the region, your former leaders, such as Jakaya Kikwete of Tanzania, Thabo Mbeki of South Africa, Ian Khama of Botswana, and many others in the region to try and assist. But remember, they can only do that if they are requested, particularly by the AU or by the regional organization. We are still waiting to hear from the chair of SADC, that is President Mnangagwa, in terms of where to from here. We saw his message congratulating Daniel Chapo after that announcement by the Constitutional Council. Now we are waiting to hear that these calls, that there should be some engagement, as South Africa has done in terms of that call. Foreign Affairs, we know Foreign Affairs represents South Africa. And therefore, people can't say it's just a spokesperson or it's just a minister. There's no way they would have issued that statement without consulting the president, who is the custodian of the foreign policy in the country.
Sophie, thank you so much for unpacking all of that for us. Of course, this is an important story, not only in Mozambique, but also for the region, more especially South Africa. That was our international news editor, Sophie Mokoena, just unpacking the situation in Mozambique there for us.